Hello guys, Toki here with another episode of Let's Play Europa Barbarorum 2. Um, Back at it with the Roman campaign. So last time I had just taken Rhegion and was going to try and start dealing with the massive barbarian force up to the north. Um, After that, I'll probably look to expand down here into Sicily once I've taken probably about these 4 or 5 provinces here just to get up to the Alps and then come down here and start causing problems with the Carthaginians. Unfortunately, it will probably be a good amount of time before I can actually have this army leave. Still a lot of unrest, so it'll probably be just a lot of turn ending for a little while. I can build a colony and I'll be able to get more Roman troops, which is what I want, but less italic troops. Fine. Be looking to establish colonies wherever I go. So I guess one of the things I can talk about that I've mentioned a few times before is, the Romans, they didn't use a lot of cavalry, and honestly, neither did the Greeks. A lot of the military forces at the time didn't really use cavalry very much. And one of the reasons, other than there just not being too many horses in Italy or Greece, they could have solved that just by breeding more if they really wanted to. But cavalry wasn't that strong because the stirrup hadn't been invented yet. And the stirrup, if you think about it, is extremely important for managing to stay on a horse while it's at, a full gallop. Especially if you're going to be, crashing into people and other horses. If you want any chance of staying on your horse, you're going to need a stirrup. So that's why a lot of the cavalry around this time was light cavalry, um, you know, with basically kind of skirmisher cavalry, um, and the Romans, you know, because they didn't have horses and they didn't really fight anyone around the Mediterranean that had horses, it was one of the things that they ended up struggling with later on once they expanded, all the way over here into the east and they started encountering the kind of the nomadic tribes, specifically like the Parthians, and then later on the Huns up in the north here, and even the Mongols in the very late period. At least the after after the Roman Empire got split up to the Western and Eastern, or it became the Byzantine Empire, um, they always struggled with horses, and that was eventually kind of what led to their downfall. Is they could not beat um, like mainly horse armies. That's one of the reasons why they stopped expanding out here, because they they could not win battles to expand any further. So that's kind of a why they didn't use horses. They weren't very effective without a stirrup. So here's the colony that I could build. You can see I get some public order minuses, but I also get bonuses, so it kind of balances out. I'll also be able to recruit these Roman troops, which is what I want. Um, I think, not sure when I'll be able to build one in down south here, but that would be ideal, so that it becomes more Romanized. Still see a lot of unrest here at Tarentum. I'm still just recruiting troops as I can, but I'm also trying to build buildings here in a few places to try and help set me up for a little bit later on. So, kind of on a related note to these stirrups and, why the Romans stopped eventually expanding east, um, you might be kind of wondering then, well, why did the Romans stop expanding, up here, kind of into the northeast and even south into Africa? Well, I mean, just looking at it, you can see, they took over North Africa, but anywhere south of here is just desert. It's the Sahara, and there's nothing there. There's nothing worth getting from there. And they obviously wanted Egypt because the Nile was, for them, it became a huge source of grain. Eventually, Italy couldn't feed itself, because there were so many people. So they brought in a lot of grain from here. So that's why they didn't go south. And they expanded up here into Britain, but eventually they built the wall, Hadrian's Wall. Basically because they got tired of fighting. It's not that they couldn't have expanded all throughout the British Isles. They could have. Their military was far superior to anything that the Pictish or the Scots or the Celts had up here. Um, but it just wasn't worth it. There was really no there was really no financial benefit to expanding up here. Britain's kind of a cold, wet, rainy place. There's not a lot of agriculture to be done there. There wasn't a lot of people or big cities or trade going through there. So you basically, you keep pushing back the barbarians because, each time you fight out here, say, well, now these guys are going to be coming in instead of these guys. And then if you fight out here, you've got these guys coming in, and you basically keep taking steps out. It's called having a turbulent frontier. Basically, each group of barbarians you eliminate by basically coming out and pacifying a region, another one will take their place. So basically, by the time they got here into northern France, well, they were still getting raids across the English Channel. So they expanded into the British Isles, and they're still getting raids from up north. And, well, eventually, since this land is basically not worth trying to fight over, you just build a wall and try and keep them out up here. And over into kind of Eastern Europe, again, it wasn't that they couldn't have conquered it. It's just a matter of, is it worth it? And really, it just wasn't. There wasn't a lot to be gained. You're talking about having all these small kind of barbaric tribes up here that they don't have really much trade, and there's just not a lot to be gained. So eventually the Roman Empire just stopped at the Rhine through Germany. And then over here, the Danube had stopped because, there's always barbarians on your borders, and you can either keep fighting them and keep saying, we're gonna pay the expenses and not deal with it, or you can just say, well, here's a nice natural kind of river border, not super easy to cross, and that's just where they decided to stop. It was actually Augustus Caesar who kind of in the end finally said, enough's enough. We've been, our empire's been growing. It's no longer worth the cost of expanding. So that's why the Roman Empire ended up taking the shape that it did just around the Mediterranean. And then, of course, eventually, later on, it got split kind of right down the middle. Rome and Italy and kind of the western part of North Africa and Britain and Spain and France, they all became the Western Roman Empire, and everything to the east became the Eastern Roman Empire. And they did that because the emperor at the time, I think Diocletian, decided that there's just too much land for basically a single government in Rome to be ruling over, and so they made a Eastern government over in Constantinople. Eventually, if you look at it, just looking on a map, at least a map somewhat accurate of the time, why did the Western Roman Empire fall apart and basically get overrun by barbarians? Well, you look at it right now, what is in the Western Roman Empire? Barbarians, a lot of barbarians, more barbarians, Carthage, which the Romans destroyed, so there was, this kind of small part of North Africa along the coast that was mostly civilized, but other than that, it was basically just Italy. And you can't manage all of this area without having the support of the civilized side of the empire, you know, Greece, um, over here in Persia, Egypt. This side, the eastern side, is the civilized, economically powerful side of the empire, and that's why the Western Roman Empire failed, but the Byzantine Empire, or the Eastern Roman Empire, lasted until almost the 1500s. That's that's about, you know, 1,000 years longer than the Western Roman Empire, which was overrun by Vandals, the Goths, you name it. There was just no way for the Western Roman Empire to sustain itself. So we see up here the Sarumate, the Sarmatians. They've expanded a lot. So have these guys, the Sakaraka. Um, that that's not unusual. Um, you know, they're basically steppe peoples. They have a lot of horses. They're pretty nomadic, even though they have cities. See, they're like basically all just small little villages with some yurts. So they may have a lot of land, but economically speaking, they aren't going to be terribly powerful. Um, Something later in the game that will become annoying to deal with is the fact that their entire armies are basically going to be horses, and like I said earlier, the Romans struggled against horses because how do you fight basically skirmisher cavalry that can just swoop in, shoot you a bunch with arrows, and then run away with infantry? It's hard to beat that, um, at least with infantry. So that's something that much later on, you know, if I get expanded over here and they start pushing down, I'm not sure. We'll have to see who eventually wins out, kind of between these northern steppe horse tribe people, who I end up having to deal with. Really be nice for some of these kids to grow up and become generals, so I can put them in some of these towns. Faction leader's probably gonna die here pretty soon. Next turn, these guys will be ready, and I'll be able to actually fight. Start fighting up here in the north. And I think try and take a couple of these places today. Maybe the next ones after that. But I think once I get, say, these 5 provinces here, once I get them taken and pacified, my economy should be really pretty strong by then. I shouldn't have to recruit too many more guys after that. I'll probably try and fill up these armies all the way, but other than that, it should be pretty easy for me to take these few places. Let's see, there's 3 armies right here, but oh, so these guys actually have a phalanx. That's interesting. That'll be kind of annoying to deal with, and I think, yeah, these are all skirmisher cavalry, so those will be annoying. Oh. So there goes my faction leader. So this is... So... yeah, the guy that I selected will be the next guy, so I have to find someone after him. I would really have liked to had one of these kids be grown up enough. I think what I'll do is just select this guy. Because when this guy dies, this guy will be pretty close to dying, and this guy might have already died. You can see they're pretty close in age, and if they say they live to be mid-70s, so this guy will basically be also or in his late 60s, early 70s. But I'll be able to basically, if these 2 guys die at the same time, I'll be able to then select, you know, a younger successor. see, now I'm in negative money, so need to figure out some areas where I can maybe trim some troops down. Just to try and get back into the positives. Really might just have to live with it for now. Okay with stopping growth in a couple places just to try and I don't ever want to get too much into debt so that it takes me a long time to come back out. But right now I think it's time to fight. They retreated. What I'm gonna do is try and organize my forces a little bit better. I'd like one really strong force that I can engage with first and then have backup units if I need them. I want. This guy should be here. The Roman army was a little bit superior, at least in terms of organization, even early on. So should be able to win this. So you might be saying like, oh my god, like this formation is so boring. Well, Roman formations were kind of boring. They didn't need to be too fancy. Basically, they just needed to have a couple walls of guys, and you know they could reinforce wherever they needed to. The Roman formation system was very modular. It was designed to be flexible. It was one of the things that came about how to beat the Greek and Macedonian phalanx. Phalanx was not super flexible. They basically just wanted a wall of guys, while the Romans wanted to be able to move around and get around more easily. So right away I have a small problem in that the reinforcements are coming from behind me. So I'm going to try and first, actually, they come and attack me. Yeah, I'm just gonna go, because if I engage these guys I might be able to destroy them before the rest of their reinforcements can get up into the fight. start turning my forces back. Most of these guys shouldn't come back into the fight. So you can see here, you know, these guys don't really even have a saddle, but especially, definitely no stirrup there. So, pretty hard to stay on a horse without a stirrup. Takes a lot of practice. So another thing you might be looking at and saying, wait a second, if these are Roman troops, why don't they look like the guys from, you know, the Roman army from Gladiator, or, you know, the kind of normal way that we think of what a Roman, you know, legionnaire or something would look like? Well, you have to remember that this is just as Rome is starting to become, you know, a world power. This is before they even had legions. The legion didn't come about until a few military reforms later. So these guys, they're not professional troops. These are just citizens who basically show up with whatever they have. You know, you can see their armor and what they're wearing is different, and you know, realistically speaking, it would have been even more different. You know, some of these guys have better equipment than others, but for the most part, they're kind of the same. And I think later on in the game, I think you have to take like certain provinces or something, and it has to be a certain year, and you have to hold certain provinces, and then you get reforms that start shifting the units into a professional army, one that, you know, you sign up to serve in for 20 years or whatever. And that's when they start getting equipped with their typical looking Roman cuirass, you know, Roman shield, and of course the gladius. So later on, I'm not sure when exactly, but later on down the road we should see military reforms that will start making these guys more professional, and they'll be even better than they are already. See how they're basically just running away? Imagine trying to chase, you know, horses down while getting shot at by arrows, because that's what eventually I'll have to be dealing with. And of course, you know, if you stop chasing them and you turn your back, then you're just getting shot in the back with arrows. One of the other problems with fighting skirmisher type forces is all of your guys get really spread out and disorganized. Super hard to hold any kind of formation when you have your enemies running all over and you're trying to chase them down and fight them, and they just don't want to fight you. Alright, I won that. Did not have very many losses. Killed a good amount of guys, captured a lot. So, not too bad for our first fight up in the north. So, come down here. Get rid of that problem. I think what I'm actually going to do here is just maintain the siege. I want these guys to sally and come out and fight me. I don't want to have to go. I don't want to have to try and kill them in the town square. It's just too costly. So they should sally forth once it comes to the Barbarian turn. Yeah. They have to, otherwise they basically lose the army for no reason. There we go. So hardly lost anybody. They lost everyone. Much much better situation than if I had um, tried to assault the city and had to have fought a large portion of these guys to the death. Yep, so they're changed into Bononia. I guess I better build this first. But I think for now, it's a pretty good place to stop. We'll continue putting these videos out. As long as they're getting some views. I'm not expecting a whole lot out of them, but it's just something to do while I play this game that I would be playing anyways, so hopefully you guys find something enjoyable out of it, and I'll catch you next time.